Hello, everyone. This is Live Life Well TV host Robert Landau. We are back with another episode of a trivia program here on this channel that we call Top 10, which, if you haven't seen it before, well, I guess it's kind of obvious. Every single week, we are going to cover a different top 10 type of list. So, really, it is all in the name of trivia and interesting facts. And we've got both of those bundled up in one in today's episode. It is called the Top 10 Longest Flights in the World. So, fasten your seatbelt. We'll begin in just one moment. All right, before we take off, we would like to acknowledge a website by the name of businessinsider.com. We'd also like to say that these were the top 10 longest flights in the world pre-COVID, because since as of this recording, the airlines are just coming back to where they were and are still not where they were before COVID, we thought we would go back to 2019 just for the sake of trivia and interesting facts and tell you what the top 10 longest flights in the world were back in 2019, when things were really in full bloom in the incredible aviation industry. I don't know about you, but I've always been a huge fan of commercial aviation. As soon as I could drive, and I was raised in the suburbs of New York City, I would drive into JFK and park, I believe it was on the Pan Am building. And those were the days when you could go out on the observation decks and there were no gates, fences, security. I mean, you could almost touch the planes. And where the Pan Am building was in JFK, I would just be in awe because I would see all of the long haul airliners take off almost right in front of me, going to Europe and parts beyond. But let's begin now, and we're going to go in descending order from 10 to 1, and 1 will highlight the longest flight in the world as of 2010. Some of these itineraries that we're going to present may very well still be in operation, but I thought, like we said before, it would be cool to take a look at 2010 when things were in full throttle. So without further ado, let's begin with the 10th longest flight in the world, a la 2019. The airline was Delta Airlines. It operated a daily service on the 10th longest route in the world between its hub in Atlanta and Johannesburg, South Africa, one of the furthest destinations from the US, non-stop. So think about that, Atlanta all the way south to Johannesburg. Its largest jet, Delta's largest jet at the time, the Boeing 777-200, could be found flying the route, which is typically scheduled over 16 hours and 30 minutes. 16 hours and 30 minutes. Think about that. What would you do on a flight that was 16 hours and 30 minutes? And bear in mind, this is the 10th longest flight in the world, or at least it was in 2019. Let's talk about that just a bit in more finery. The Atlanta-based airline Delta is also one of the only 2 US airlines featured in this top 10 list, having flown 713 flights on the 7,229 nautical mile route between Atlanta and Johannesburg. The route is one of the few nonstop routes between the US and South Africa, and the only one, at least at the time, that was operated by Delta. Number 9, between San Francisco and Singapore. I think I might have done that actually. Many of you know that I used to be an international cruise director, and I would be flown to Asia from the States quite often. And I often had to think about the same question I just asked you previously. What do you do on a 16-hour and 30-minute flight? Well, not much. And I don't know if you have this issue. Maybe it's not an issue, but I can't sleep on planes. I can't sleep on short flights. I can't sleep on 16-hour and 30-minute flights. I don't know if it's just the constant rev of the engines and that energy, but it does not lull me to sleep. So on those long flights, I'm just up. But thank God now there are tons of movies to look at. You can read books, not just books. So I got by pretty well. Number 9, as we said, between San Francisco and Singapore, in 2019, 2 airlines competed on the 7,330 nautical mile route between the Bay Area and the incredibly beautiful Asian city-state. United Airlines and Singapore Airlines were the 2 that competed against one another back then. United flew the route using the Boeing 787 Dreamliner, while Singapore Airlines opted for the Airbus A350 XWB, both still absolutely state-of-the-art, incredible long-distance aircraft. It really doesn't get better than the 2 of them. Flight times were scheduled on both airlines for around 16 hours and 30 minutes. Singapore Airlines also operated a one-stop, same plane option through Hong Kong for people that wanted to break things up just a little bit. The route was the only in the top 10 featuring 2 airlines with nearly 2,500 flights being flown on the route back in 2019. Here is number 8. It is between New York and Manila, Philippines. Philippine Airlines' nonstop route between Manila and New York saw its first year of nonstop service in 2019 after being debuted at the end of 2018, replacing one-stop service through Vancouver, Canada. The Philippines flag carrier utilized its new Airbus A350 on the 7,392 nautical mile route, typically scheduled for 16 hours and 30 minutes. Here's number 7. It was between Dallas and Sydney. How about that? Non-stop. I don't know. I still marvel at the fact that something that big can get up in the sky and carry as many forks and rolls of toilet paper as it does. I think flight is an amazing wonder. So Dallas and Sydney, Qantas, the airline of Australia, operated the only nonstop flight between Dallas and Sydney, its deepest flight into the continental US, for which the Airbus A380 was used. The Australian flag carrier began operating the route back in 2011, which between 2013 and 2016 was the longest scheduled route in the world. Less than a decade later, the route has fallen to the number 7 spot as new aircraft technology makes longer flights possible. The 7,452 nautical mile route saw 636 flights just in 2019 alone, which are typically scheduled at over 17 hours, at least in the westbound direction. Woo! Number 6, between Houston and Sydney. The nonstop route between Houston and Sydney was the longest route for United Airlines, which launched that route in 2018. The 7,600 7,467 nautical mile route is only 15 nautical miles longer than the next nearest Sydney-Dallas route that we highlighted, which was operated by Qantas. United flew 530 flights on the route back in 2019 using its Boeing 787-9 Dreamliner aircraft. Flights in the westbound direction from Houston to Sydney were typically scheduled for over 17 hours. Have you flown on the 787 Dreamliner? It's a dream. It is absolutely incredible and nice and quiet too. True state of the art. Unfortunately, I haven't been on the Airbus equivalent, at least as of yet. Stay tuned. Here's number 5, between Los Angeles and Singapore. Singapore Airlines resumed its nonstop service between Singapore and Los Angeles in 2018 after receiving the Airbus A350-900 XWB aircraft, earning it another spot on this longest route list. Having first competed with United Airlines on the route at the time of its launch, the Singaporean flag carrier now has a monopoly on that service. Over the course of 2019, 1,034 flights were flown on the 7,611 nautical mile route, which can be scheduled between 17 and 18 hours, depending on the time of the year. And you know what? Since we're going down the list, they keep getting longer and longer in duration. So hang on, we're not there yet. Here's number 4. It was between Auckland, New Zealand, and Dubai. Auckland is at the furthest reaches for some Middle Eastern airlines, including Emirates, which began service to the New Zealand capital city back in 2016. It primarily used its flagship Airbus A380. Emirates flew 710 flights on the 7,664 nautical mile route, which can take nearly 17 hours and 30 minutes in the westbound direction. So the flight times may vary, but what makes these the longest in the order that they're listed on this list happens to be the number of nautical miles. With that, we go to number 3, as the nautical miles tend to increase. This number 3 route is between Perth, Australia, and London. Now think about that, between Australia and London non-stop. The Wright brothers wouldn't know what to say about that. Qantas, the airline of Australia, launched the route between Perth, Australia, and London in 2018, at which point it became the first regularly scheduled nonstop link between Australia and the United Kingdom. Flight times varied on the 7,829 nautical mile route, but it could be scheduled for as long as nearly 18 hours in the westbound direction. The Boeing 787-9 Dreamliner was used for the services, of which 730 flights were flown. Travelers from Eastern Australia cities, including Sydney, Melbourne, and Brisbane, could fly to London in a single stop within the same country. Number 2, ooh, we're getting there. It was between Doha, Qatar, and that's spelled Qatar. I know many people pronounce it as Qatar, but they say Qatar. But it was between Doha and Auckland, New Zealand, the longest route in 2019 for yet another Middle Eastern carrier, terminated in Auckland, New Zealand, with Qatar Airways in the number 2 spot for its 7,843 nautical mile route. Operated by the 777-200LR, scheduled flight times on the route could exceed 18 hours. Yikes. Qatar Airways flew 721 flights on the route in 2019. I have some friends that are flight attendants. I don't know anyone at the moment who does this long haul international type route. But can you imagine being a flight attendant on any one of these 10 flights that we're highlighting here? I mean, I know they have rest times as mandated probably by the FAA, and they have special rest quarters, but still, wow, it's one thing to be a passenger on flights this long, but it's another to work them on your feet. Even if you work 3 hours and one off, 3 hours and one off, that's a long period of time to be on the job. But it's fun nevertheless, and you certainly have incredible flight benefits because of your hard work. Which brings us to, drum roll please, number one, between Singapore and Newark, New Jersey. That's a long nonstop flight. The title of the world's longest route back in 2019 belonged to Singapore Airlines' Singapore Newark route, which reopened in 2018 using the airline's Airbus A350-900 XWB. The amazing 8,277 nautical mile route took nearly, are you ready for this, 19 hours in the eastbound direction with 3 meals served during the flight. Only 3 meals? I guess you were sleeping the rest of the route. At least some people did. Singapore Airlines abandoned the nonstop route in 2013, but reopened it once the fuel-efficient Airbus A350 made it financially feasible, especially in a 2-class configuration consisting of business class and premium economy. A total of 728 flights were performed by the Singaporean flag carrier in 2019. So there you have it. Any takers? I'll tell you something. It's really not so bad when you get to any of these destinations, which each in their own right are certainly worth the amount of hours and nautical miles to get there. So I hope you enjoyed this episode of Top 10, and we didn't even encounter any turbulence. What a fabulous, all but brief flight. We hope you will return for another journey with us on Live Life Well TV on our show Top 10. Until then, this has been Robert Landau, Live Life Well TV host. Thank you so much for joining us.